Hey guys, so we're going to do a little baking here using Tex Tools. Now, we're going to get started on the default cube. I just want to point something out. A lot of people seem to get confused by this, but I'm going to right click Shade It Smooth, go into Edit Mode. Just drop down here, turn on Split Normals. Okay, and you can see here they're not split right now. So Shade Smooth gives you a single vertex direction. Okay, and so when you are doing let's do like a chamfer like this, and you shade it auto smooth, you'll get something like this. You'll see, oh, these are all split. Okay, now when I make these videos, I say use a weighted normal modifier and uncheck, make sure you don't have keep sharp check. You'll see why here if we turn on the end result by clicking the button. That's because it gives you a single vertex direction. Now what the weighted normal modifier does is it's actually, results here, you can see with it off, what we have with auto smooth, shaded smooth, have this number, right? But auto smooth again real quick. And, the weighted normal modifier. Okay. Now, so this is what we have, but when you crank up the weight, it straightens these out just a little bit more. That so that's what I'm usually doing. That's what I'm looking for. I'm trying to get these plantar faces nice, straight up and down. So that's why this cube can look this good. And this is usually what you want to do when you're baking. Chamfer more than likely on edge if possible, because when you use sharps on just the default cube, and you're basically splitting the normal, right? And so usually you get a weird bake. This is why. So we're going to go over to UV editor just real quick in case. Make sure you got it all laid out. Smart UV deck. Click OK. Get island margin. Bump it up. Okay. We're going to use Tex Tools now. We're going to go to the shading tab. Mine's customized here. You just right click. You can do like vertical splits, those around, do all that fun stuff. Right click, join. Okay. And so the default cube, I'm going to give it material. Not really important right now, but it's there. All right. This is the image viewer, okay, or image editor. Now, if I go ahead and press N over here, you'll see Tex Tools also pops up over here. So this is the add-on I'm talking about, one we're going to be using to bake. Um, this is free. It was originally started with 3D Studio Max, made its way over to Blender, and so now it's over here. So the baking tab, and now you got all these options, all these different bakes you can do. Blender is still going to be a really slow baker by comparison to some of the other programs, but it's really useful. So one of them happens to be the tangent bevel. Okay, tangent bevel is more or less like a bevel shader. We're going to click on that one, and right now with this setup here, I'm not going to tweak anything right now. I'm going to bake and see what happens. Okay, this is what it does. It creates a bevel like this on all of the edges. Okay, that's a pretty large bevel though, so we really want to crank it down a little bit, so like 0.01. Bake again real quick. Still pretty big. Go a little bit smaller, 0.005 maybe. Bake that again. The bevel shaders work better if they're tighter. And the bevel samples, crank it up to 16. Make it one more. You can see it's starting to look a little bit nicer. Now, Tex Tools allows you to apply anti-aliasing. This is an upsample, basically, or downsample. So it's going to bake it twice the size that you are choosing, or 4 times the size. So you can see here at the top we have the size, right? Do 1024, but if it's twice the size, 2048, then or 4 times 4096. So if you do 4096, you're baking some really high resolutions. It's going to take a little while. So you want to do previews on everything before you start trying to do like finalized bakes. Make sure it's baking properly. Okay. This might be a really tight bevel here, but might be able to lower that a little bit. Instead of using 0.05, maybe like 0.0. Okay. Anti-aliasing times for this. Let it bake. Happens now. Okay, so this is what we get. I have this little tab up here. Yours probably isn't like this because you right click on it, you can show menus, or right click, not show menus, tab there, right? Cool. And you can just save this, save as. Easiest thing to remember here is Alt S, okay, which is save. So if it isn't saved yet, you hit Alt S, it brings this up, right? So you can go to your desktop, it'll save it as the name of the object, and then yada yada, whatever after. And so normals you want to save as bit for Blender. Some programs 8 works, but for Blender 16-bit. And to the desktop PNG file. Okay, Okay, done. Over here, with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, go to Edit Preferences, Add-ons, and enable Node Wrangler. It's one that comes with Blender, so you already have it. Control-Shift-T after selecting the shader. So Control-Shift-T, go to the desktop, find the normal, load it up. It's already configured, it's all set up. You just press G and move it down if you want. This is going to be kind of universal. You can use it on all the different textures you create. But there you go. So now it's hooked up. It's there. We can press Z in this window. Go to Material Preview. Nope, not Render. Material Preview. Yeah, it's going to be hard for you to see the bevel take an effect on it, but it's there. So sometimes it helps to turn it metallic. So just metallic to 1. You turn roughness down a little bit. You can see that bevel shader is actually on there. Take an effect, right? So from back here, it's not too bad. This is really good for simple props that you need to get done super fast. But it does have a little bit of an issue. You can still see these edges quite clearly, sharp edges. And there's really nothing you can do about that. So we're going to go back to solid view, do this instead. Grab all these edges actually. For this particular object, we're going to do that chamfer. Okay. And now we can get it auto smooth. Apply the weighted normal modifier. And this is with keep sharps off. Okay, at 1. We do need to unwrap this thing a little bit differently. So we're going to select, these are in the way. Let's just turn these things off. They're kind of crowding up the scene. Okay. This loop here, or edge, this edge here, Control E marks seams. Okay, cuts it in half basically. We only really need to cut this one more time somewhere, like here. Okay. So if we press A, U, unwrap. Here we are using conformal. You can check or uncheck fill holes, and then you want to give it some margin. We're not in the UV editor, so we need to check it over there. Perhaps we can see we're laying it out like so. This actually works, believe it or not. You could add more seams though, however, if you want to. It's nothing wrong with that. So usually on these chamfered edges like this, like if you're looking at the object from this direction, you'd put it on top, right? But if you're looking at it from top, you'd probably put it on this side. Just keep that in mind. You can use either edge, it doesn't really matter, but some are easier than others. See, that splits it all up like so, right? Again, go back to shading. Here's the editor, right? Not too bad. So, following along, bake. We'll do this one more time on this one. You'll see we get a much softer result. Okay. So all you have to do now is just hit Alt S, right? And down here, you just have to hit Alt R. It might complain about a circular dependency sometimes. That's usually because when you're baking the low, you don't really need the normal hooked up to it. But since we had it, it might have complained, it might have not. Whatever the case, this one should have worked out just fine. Okay, so even though it's already chamfered and it's got a weighted normal, so it was already being shaded really well, you see these just add a little bit of extra to the edges here. And something you can do, and you can see that little hard edge, it's really hard to see it now, but it's basically on the top side here. Okay, it still exists, it's just not as visible. And so that's what's going on. And it's not being shaded using shading auto smooth, but because we didn't have keep sharps on the modifier, it didn't keep the sharp. Okay. Pretty simple. All right, so here's how it goes, basically. You can do this kind of workflow like this. Bevel on that, add a loop, Alt S this in. You can see how when I Alt S, it goes crazy, offset it even. Works better, usually, not always. But sometimes you want to still use sharps, believe it or not. So this one here, I'm going to mark a seam, Control E, and sharp as well. We're going to check keep sharp. It's going to turn everything sharp. But this is why I tell people to max this out. Because you only want to keep things sharp when you know you want them sharp, right? So if you max that out, you won't have any real issues here. You can select these two, for them, and you're going to get this really nice setup going like this potentially. It's a little bit too, I think, wide for that little middle section like that, but it's something you could do and might want to try out. It usually works better when these are kind of cram towards the middle, like a really harsh crevice, and then a little bit. Still works like this. Oh, you could tweak it. All right, cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and just slide these instead of scaling them, slide them closer. Now these would probably benefit from having an additional seam here as well. You don't have to necessarily put one there, but it would probably help it. And so let's unwrap it real quick. The editor, check it. You see, wasting a lot of space here. So tweak the values. You're looking for about 4 to 16 pixels, depending on the size of your image. Sometimes you get away with 2 for a little bit of bleed room. Yeah, we got some that going. Unhook this. That'll get rid of that circular dependency if it existed. Bake it again real quick. So yeah, Tex Tools is pretty cool. It allows you to just create things super fast. And you can do highs to low polys. Do that as well. The only downside of that process is you can't use a cage, as far as I can tell. At least if you can, I haven't seen the option for it. But this works really well for just quick bakes on simple objects, right? So I Alt S, saved it, Alt R, reload it, connect it back up, and there we go. Have that going on now. Fairly clean, right? Compared to a lot of the other baking tutorials out there you've probably seen. Okay, so floaters. We're going to do an ambient occlusion. Somebody was asking about it. We're going to throw in a floater for the heck of it. Let's do a circle. I'm just going to raise it up. Go into edit mode with it. Press A, F, scale it in. That. So believe it or not, a lot of times when you're baking, you're using cycles. You're not using so cycles. Do render preview. This is the problem you're going to have right now. It casts shadows. Okay. We don't want shadows. So what we're going to do, go to object properties here. Your shading. You got to switch the renderer to cycles, right? Now under, not shading, so visibility, turn off shadow, array visibility. Go to edit mode, go back to solid view. You can inset, hold control. Usually when you're baking normals, you want to do slight little tapers to everything. That kind of setting it, insetting it, insetting, setting again and again. Slightly a little bit more. This should subdivide because this middle section's a flat plane basically, flat circle. Press ES, scale in, ES, scale in, ES, scale in, M, merge at center, right? And then now what you get is if you Control 2, it subdivides, shade smooth. Now you can delete the border if you needed to. All right, so this is going to be the illusion that it sells in the normal map. Okay, now unfortunately, you can't really push these out too far because we don't have the ability to use a cage. The cage issues also, the downside of that is that you can get waviness to your normal maps. So you still might want to use cycles for some things and just regular baker with cycles, right? Right here, bake. Yeah, because you can use cages with those, roll waviness, all that fun stuff. But this should work fine for this anyways. And so this cube, you can assume that this is going to be underscore LP, okay? And we can duplicate it real quick and we can make one that's HP. Okay. Now, the circle will also be cube underscore HP. And I like to put underscore floater here. Now, this is unique to Tex Tools. There's other naming conventions for like Substance Painter or whatever. But this works over here pretty well. Okay? If you don't actually put the floater behind the HP, for some reason you get a mess where it like complains about not being it's looking for a high poly or low poly of this, but it doesn't exist. So it goes cube HP on all of it, and then right, simple enough. So we can actually grab all of these. Control click LP, that makes it the active element. You'll see here we're using tangent bevel. We're going to do an actually high to low now as well. We're just basically using the low as a high and then adding the floater in. All right, and this is where you're going to have to actually play with cage extrusion. We don't have the ability to load a cage as far as I can tell. But also you can lock this, which is really cool. So if you just click lock, you don't ever have to worry about selecting these again like this. You can select wherever you want, it's still locked together. Cool. And so we can play around with the cage extrusion and ray distance mounts. These things do matter and you'll have to tweak them. Okay. Basically, cage means your low poly as it inflates, right? And then the ray distance is how far can seek for the other surface, basically. So now we can, I'm just going to set these to like something like 0.2 for starters, and we'll see what we get out of that. Just both of them, 0.2. We won't do no anti-aliasing right now. We're just going to bake. What we get. Oh, take this off, by the way, so we don't get no circular dependencies or not. Bake again. Yeah. So far, it looks pretty good. It looks like it got it right off the bat, that's not bad. Normally, it takes a little while of tweaking these, so you might have to turn ray distance up or down, or cage extrusion up or down. Just tweak them around. But they're usually not too far away from each other, generally. All right, so yeah, I think that's fine. Do a 1024, and we'll do a 2x here. So bake a 2048 real quick. Oh, I accidentally hit preview texture. You see when you hit preview texture, it kind of acts weird. Just gonna go back to the material. It does let you actually preview it, which is nice, but to bake it really. Hopefully it bakes out correctly. Should take a little second this time. Get that ambient occlusion going after this. This one should be done soon here. It doesn't have a little loading bar, unfortunately, so you have to just kind of wait around and hopefully it pops up and your computer doesn't crash. Once it does, it does. So you can see here, it's like so. Alt S. It's a different type of normal, right? So this is just save it as a PNG. Done. All right, and we can actually come over here, just exit this. We can open that new one. So the one was the bevel. This is the tangent one. Set it to non-color. Make sure normals are set to non-color. Plug it back to normal. May be good, it may not be. This is the issue you have when you're not using a cage. You see it's actually catching the rays from, I think, each side of that. So it can cause a little bit of a janky bake sometimes because of that. Simpler objects without too many concave shapes, concave areas such as like creases, um, probably be better off for it. All right. Now, we're going to switch to ambient occlusion. These tend to bake a lot slower, so I'm just going to bake it at 512. But change the samples up pretty high, like 128, whatever the case. All right, so, and it shouldn't, the normal shouldn't even matter on this one. All right, so should be able to just click bake on this one, let it go. Gonna take the longest to bake in my opinion. I think AO is one of the longer ones. Diffuse, the color base color map is pretty fast, but see it comes in, it's pretty janky. Got all kinds of little weird stuff going on. They're just, I guess they're just ray misses or there's no data there yet. So might have to increase the resolution or you might have to increase sample count. Going on exactly with this one. I'm going to say 6. Bake it real quick. It didn't take too long, so I guess we'll just do it a little bit higher, see what happens. It might be having an issue because it has low poly on top of it, basically. Might not like that. But it could also be the cage extrusion or ray distance. all kinds of little things you got to fiddle with, generally speaking. So, but if it works, right? Main point is you don't want a shadow casted from the floater. That's why you have that shadow thing. It's gonna happen. Oh, it did happen. It is still very dirty. Of course, when I'm trying to record a video, I get the worst results I've seen so far all night. Not real sure what I can do about that one. It's got to be the ray distance. Bump that up a little. We're going to do preview sizes here real quick, just so we don't have to wait around all day trying to figure out what's going on. 56 real quick. Bake it. Get some of that noise gone. Okay, that one's nicer. It was the ray distance. That could be in the normal map potentially too. You might want to go back and check your normal. 1024 now. Samples, right? 200 samples. Take a little bit longer. Okay, that's much nicer than what we had before. It was definitely that ray distance in this case. It needed to go up just maybe just a slight bit higher than the cage extrusion. All right, cool. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll just do the 2x on it, bake it one more time, and we'll save it after that. All right. So yeah, it's a little bit finicky. Tex Tools, like it's really good for if you're just doing a model that you just want to bake onto real quick, like a low poly or mid poly. Don't necessarily want to do a high to low. But if you had to, it's still a better, I think, option to do things rather quickly compared to using Vault Baker. Right? Only one other tool that I'm going to probably show here in Blender when it comes to baking, which going to be Simple Bake, right? I haven't done a video on it yet. Simple Bake's, in my opinion, the best baker for Blender. But at least there's other ones that are available. You can see this one's done now. This is a much cleaner result. It's much Control S. You can save it out. Shift A, create texture, desktop. There. Plug it into this. So now we have some occlusion. We can hide this because it's floater. Hide the high as well. Okay, so we have in fact baked out AO a normal. Now, there's other options in here, of course. So you can do procedural materials, and then those procedural materials don't require UV maps usually, right? Depending on how you make them. But then you can UV map your object and bake them to a base color. You can also create cavity masks, bevel masks, um, position maps, all kinds of great stuff in here you really need to explore and play around with. But this is like half the stuff you would get out of your substance bakes, basically, that allow you to create better materials. And keep that in mind. It's really useful. It's a pretty awesome little add-on for Blender that I don't really think a whole lot of people have talked a whole lot about. So that's something you'll want to play around with, right? Now, because this is ambient occlusion, I just want to point something out. Normally, you would have like an image texture of some sort. It's this. That would be plugged into your base color, right? Something like that. And so you can do a texture color, mix RGB, plug it in here, plug this one in down here. Okay. So this is kind of backwards, but the AO goes in the bottom one, I think. Maybe I got it backwards again. We'll see. But basically, you multiply it. Okay. Right here at the bottom. I know it's kind of hard to see, guys, but it's multiply. Right. You turn the factor down to 0. Okay. And you should see your texture, not the ambient occlusion. It should just be the texture, right? That 0. The ambient occlusion should be getting multiplied. into the textures. So if I go up to 1, add AO to. It's usually the best way to go about doing it. Now this is technically not a base color anymore, or like an albedo. It's more or less a diffuse, right? Um, there's no ambient occlusion socket for Blender, principled BSDF. So this is how guys do it. Basically, you're baking the ambient occlusion in, um, or mixing the ambient occlusion into base color. So it's not technically accurate for PBR workflow, but it's nobody really cares. It looks right for the most part. And yeah, so that's that. Now, I'll be doing additional videos here shortly on probably X normal and a couple other, maybe some other things I find eventually. But this is all part of that bacon series, right? So obviously, can't argue with the results too much. Tex Tools and Blender Baker, even though it may not be the most like the default Blender Baker is just very unuser friendly, but the Tex Tools is still using basically the same system. It's just an add-on for it, or the add-on utilizes all that, and the user interface difference makes it so it's a lot easier to work with. Um, but yeah, the Baker in Blender is very capable in some respects. Like it doesn't seem like it has a whole lot of issues. When it comes to output of quality, isn't really a big issue if you set it correctly, right? It can get some pretty decent quality out of it. Now, it just is slow. That's really the big thing. It's slow. Be checking out the other add-on, Simple Bake. This is the one which kind of hard to see all this, but anyways, we'll do it down here. This one has a ton of cool stuff, so I just want to get you amped up on this one. Even the video's not out, right? Do like EV bakes, basically. It does like tricks with I think Eevee or something. But anyways, I don't know how it does it, but this thing gets like an update every other week. It's updated pretty frequently. You have like presets and stuff, so you can just reload all the same settings. Really good at what it does. All right, so I just wanted to kind of show you that little base there, anyways. For now, kind of look at it, but that's it for this one, guys. I'll check you out on the next one. All right, take care.